The interesting thing about asking me to present at an internet safety conference or evening is that prevention of child exploitation and human trafficking is not my wheelhouse. To prevent it is very different from what I do every day. What I do every day is the intervention of child exploitation and victims of human trafficking. I sit with children, minors, young adults who have experienced some form of exploitation either through child pornography production and or human trafficking. So everything I know, I learned from my victims, right? I stand before you here tonight knowing full well that the internet is a very, very scary place to be, and I also know that you as parents have absolutely no choice whether or not your children are on the internet. One of the things that I think is also interesting is I think when people show up for talking about internet safety, kind of, and maybe you're there, I'm not going to make you raise your hand, we formulate our focus on if we can just get these kids to do the right thing and not do what we tell them not to do, right? And we're blaming immediately already potential victims who are going to be on the internet, who are sought out by predators. So I want you to kind of switch your brain around a little bit tonight. And as much as it's our responsibility when we're on the internet, I also want you to recognize that the predators that are out there are very, very good and very, very skilled. And when they encounter your child, what you really, truly want is for your child to tell you, right? Or tell someone. And that's what we've been teaching kids for years. So let me just talk to you a little bit about what online enticement looks like. I'm going to try to familiarize you with that. I'm going to tell you a couple of real case studies that maybe will bring home some important information for the kids that are sitting in the audience tonight. And I recognize the ages that we have here tonight, so I'll be careful. The other day I sat with a teen girl on the west side of Michigan who had just been on TikTok for about 11 hours when she was exposed to somebody who had approximately 50,000 followers, who became her friend, who became her good friend, who became her confidant. And when I say 11 hours, that doesn't sound like a long time, but when it's nonstop texting, right, it becomes a relationship. And throughout those 11 hours, he had convinced her that he loved her. He had convinced her that he wanted to meet her someday and told her that if she loved him, she would show him that, right? And so you can imagine the next few steps that occurred throughout that night. But the saddest part of the story is that she ended up without many choices. She ended up being extorted, and she had zero capability of how to get herself out of that. And so her solution was to wake up dead, right? I made that up because I don't think that children really understand the magnitude of what suicide is, right? It's an out, but the results of that are just not in the forefront of their mind. Those of you that have 18-year-olds in your house, for whatever reason, our country believes that 18-year-olds are grown-ups, right? They're adults. Those of you who have one or have had one, you know that that's just not it, right? They're still drinking our milk out of our refrigerator. They're still driving our cars, some of them using our electricity, and we're still the boss of them, right? Some of them are seniors in high school when they're 18 years old. So for whatever reason, our country says an 18-year-old is an adult. But what we really, truly know about becoming an adult in the biology of it is that a person does not have a fully formed brain until, if you want to guess, around the age of 25. And I will say that females beat males by about 9 months, but that's not what we're here to talk about, right? So you have a fully formed brain at the age of 25, and the frontal lobe of that brain that's formed at the end is the risk-taking portion of the brain, which is why you can ride roller coasters up until you're about the age of 24, and then you're like, that's really not a good idea, right? So we have children among us who are not capable they have poor impulse control, right? They're not completely capable of impulse control. And we have predators who spend 24/7 perfecting their game and perfecting the way that they approach our children. And let's step back for a minute and talk about how they're approached and why they're approached. And we maybe have a vision here tonight that those children that are approached on the internet are vulnerable, possibly abused, neglected, come from broken homes, right? It's not it at all. Every single person, we're created to desire affection and attention, right? We love that feeling of being loved and to have attention and to have affection. And if you think that this is just for children, talk to whoever you know that's on a dating website right now as an adult, and you'll recognize that person too, who wants attention, who wants affection, who wants somebody to know them, who wants somebody to love them, who wants that kind of hope. So we're all there. We're there as children, we're there as teenagers, as young adults, we're there as adults that want that attention and affection. And the predators that are on the internet will give you that. And when I tell you that they'll give you that, you've never read anything like it. It's better than Harlequin novels, right? It's just beautiful words that are said to girls and boys over and over again that make them believe that they're interacting with somebody that's fair and that will love them. And that's what they want, right? So I know those of you who are in the audience who hear your parents probably say, you know, you never know who it is on the internet. The truth is, you don't. But the other truth is, for those of you parents who are sitting with your students, is that your child has a real profile, and hundreds of the friends that they know in real life have real profiles. They know what a real, authentic profile looks like, and they believe that they can see somebody else's profile and know whether or not it's authentic. And they don't really have that fear in them. When you think about being a parent and putting your child in the front lawn of your house where you have eyes on them, right? It's like they're safe, they're sitting in the front lawn of your house, but every single person that gets to walk by their house is allowed to talk to them, and you don't get to hear what it is, right? You just see people getting out of their car, walking on the sidewalk, and having conversations with your kid. You're alarmed by that, right? If you're standing at the kitchen sink, you're like, what's going on? We can't control those conversations that are happening with our kids. If there's chat rooms, if there's social media, if there's gaming, and all of that, we know that it's going to happen. And so we have to arm our children with the opportunity to know that if something happens on the internet and they get in over their head, that they come and talk to us. So my cases every day are a couple of different ways. I told you the story about the girl on the west side of Michigan. Obviously, we intervened because she swallowed a bunch of pills that night, and her friend that was also online with her believed wholeheartedly that she was telling the truth when she said she was going to end her life. Wakes her dad up, and the dad, somehow this girl convinces her dad that this isn't just dramatic, right? And said, I really think that she wants to take her own life. We have to call the police. They call the police, which I give him a lot of credit for not telling her this is a dramatic moment and you're fine and go back to sleep. The police show up, they knock on the door, they wake mom up, they say, we have to do a welfare check on your daughter. She says she's upstairs in bed. Please go check on your daughter, ma'am. And of course the police hear a horrific scream come from the bedroom because what she finds is the empty pill bottle and her daughter is laying there unconscious. So that is how we intervene. When we intervene, we hear this girl tell the story. We take the phone, we take the forensics that we have and the capabilities that we have to identify this person who has 50,000 followers and who we now know has hundreds of victims. Not hundreds that have tried to take their life, but one girl in the west side of Michigan that decided to do that. And what she says to me is, yes, she wanted to take her own life, but really what she didn't realize is that she's not ever going to wake up again, right? Because of poor impulse control. What she says is, I couldn't wake up and have 50,000 people see me and know me in that way and be mean to me because I did it. And so the fear is real in terms of predators being able to get to our children within 11 hours. The other way that we find our victims is we find bad guys before we find victims. So we are knocking on doors and making phone calls, asking parents to bring their child in, where their child next to them is getting a 4.0, doing fine in sports, acting normal at home. And when I interview that child and ask them to tell me about this person online, the story comes out with, this is what happened. This person befriended me, convinced me that they were somebody. Eventually, pictures were sent, videos were sent, and then I was extorted for more. And that's what happens. And that's where our children and our teens and even our young adults cannot manipulate that situation. So the bad guy's there, he's online, he's pretending to be a 14-year-old, pretending to be a 16-year-old, female or male, and interacting with other teens and building a friend list that makes him look authentic, and having sports pictures and everything that a kid would look at a profile and say that's an authentic person. And after the interaction happens and the attention and the affection happens and the grooming that happens to these kids happen, then the switch gets pulled. And then pictures are asked for, maybe reluctantly, maybe a child reluctantly sends that first picture. But after that first picture is sent, that's when extortion begins. Because what that predator has now is a picture that's horrifying to that child if anybody else sees it. And we can talk about the apps that, kids think that the picture immediately disappears, right? Screenshotting still happens. Video cameras are set up in these bad guys' houses. They get your children to believe that you see how it disappeared, but it is actually memorialized. And then that picture is sent back to that child with a threat, is if you don't send me another picture, if you don't do this in a video, then your mom, your coach, your best friend, all your family members will now receive this picture of you. And what are they going to say about you? And then, and maybe just then, does the child realize, I'm in over my head, right? But now they think, maybe everything that everyone told me about the internet is true, right? Now it's a bad guy, and it's not a 14-year-old. But what do they also think about adults? They think we're fair, right? So they think, I'll negotiate with this person who will be fair to me. So if he says, all you have to do is send me one more picture, or all you have to do is do this, I'll do that, and then I'm free. But we know the reality, right? The second picture is more egregious, and it goes on and on and on and on. And that's what sextortion is. It's a form of the word extortion, because it happens all the time. When I tell you that in the course of a year, Homeland Security interviews thousands of these victims, you know how popular this game is for predators. But what we have to know is we cannot blame our children for being groomed when every single day we are all groomed, right? We can't blame our victims for being victims. We have to be mad at bad guys. We have a country that's set up to immediately blame a victim for something they did wrong to cause that crime to occur to them. Who did she think she was that she could walk home from the diner at 2 o'clock in the morning after she closed alone, right? Of course, something bad's going to happen to her. Who did those two women think they were that they could go to Aruba as two females alone and not expect something bad to happen to them? The person that got robbed, why didn't they have a house alarm? Why didn't they have their house alarm set? Why did they leave their car unlocked in order to be robbed? And do you see how our focus every single time when we talk about victimization and crime victimization is immediately to think, how can I spin this so that I can pretend in my head that this could never happen to me? I'll blame the victim. But we need to be blaming bad guys, right? And when I say every single one of us is groomed, I know I could ask for hands to be raised to ask you, have you ever known somebody who did something so horrifying that you literally couldn't believe it when you heard it? And that is exactly what our predators count on, that they're a good person, that no one will ever believe that they did something like that. And they've honed their skills, and they've perfected that, and they victimize our children And I'm here to tell you, it's not our children's fault. They are in over their heads with someone who is very, very skilled and exploiting the vulnerabilities of kids, and even if they're not a vulnerable youth, exploiting what everybody wants: attention and affection and love. And they promise that, and they're good at promising that. So that's the sad story, right? But I'm not done, because we have to figure this out. We can't protect our kids from being on the internet anymore, and that's how internet safety started, right? Put the big giant desktop in the den. Every time they do their homework, you sit right next to them. We never allow kids to go to sleep with their phones in their bed. They should never be. That phone should never be alone in a room at night. That phone should be completely plugged in next to your bed, because vulnerability occurs late at night, and poor decision making or risky behavior occurs late at night. So we can't protect them all the time. So we have to figure something out. There was a case that we had in Plano, Texas in 2010, and the case came in through local police, and when they did the search warrant on the bad guy's house, they realized they were in over their heads, because there were literally thousands of victims all across the globe. This man was a nurse. He was an anesthesiologist nurse at a hospital, and he had a very good profile pretending that he was a 14-year-old female. And he was meeting boys on the internet that way. Now, this is 2010, so he was able to meet boys on Facebook, and then based on their friend lists, once he got a couple of them to friend him meaning her, right? Everybody was like, oh, he's friends with Joey, he's friends with Ryan, he's a good guy, friends with my friend, he's a real person, right? And he began interacting with them in a way that caused them to have risky behavior and send images to this girl, and she was sending them back to them. And it got much more egregious, and the threats and the sextortion began, to the point that a couple of the boys that I interviewed had attempted suicide. Parents did not know it, had attempted to hang themselves from closets that couldn't hold their weight, had attempted to take medication that they woke up and they weren't dead, right? They quit sports when they were being scouted by the national leagues, and no one could figure it out. Parents telling me, something overnight happened to my kid, and he just changed, and his behavior was so different, and it shocked me. But I talked with other parents, and what did they tell those parents? Is like, that's a teenager for you, right? They always want to be in their room, they're always crabby, they're always moody, they don't want to hang around you, and it fits with the development, so I believe it's authentic. And so this one victim of Shannon went to his mom, a single mom, which I love, and said something to his mom that suggested that he was in over his head. And the mom said, you know what I am? I'm Team Carlos, and we're going to go to the police, and what this person's done to you is horrifying, and we're going to go to the police, and we're going to figure this out. And obviously then the rest of the story is search warrant, and we identify thousands and thousands of victims. 14 of them were in Plano, Texas, because of the ability for him to friend to friend. And we did that case. It was prosecuted. I testified. A couple of the boys very bravely testified, and Shannon was prosecuted and put away. And we identified, like I said, thousands of other victims across the globe that had been extorted by Shannon. And the relief that comes from victims when they find out that you got that person is amazing, and it's therapeutic for them to hear that. But again, we're here to figure out, what do we do, right? We're here tonight for some sort of magic dust to happen so that we can prevent it if we can, and if we can't, that our kids tell us. It's routine for the cases that I do for me to sit down with a family and be the first one to tell them the horrifying news of their child has been victimized and now is being named as a federal victim of crime in a case where this has happened. They have absolutely no idea. Their mouths hang open, just like ours, when we find out somebody that we loved and trusted ended up being a monster in disguise. So what I can say and what I can offer to you, and this I made up, so I don't know if it'll work, but I'm hoping it works, right, is back when I was raising my son, we had the safe word, right? If anybody ever comes to your daycare and has to pick you up, it's probably mommy has to work late. And if you don't know them, they have to say this magic word, this phrase, and that's the only way that you can go in the car with them, right? Do you guys still do it? Because my son's 27 and I'm not even sure that exists. But if that exists, this is based on that. We have to have a way where we have an internet safety conversation with our children, where we beg them to believe us, that bad guys are out there and they look very like 14-year-old boys and girls, and it's very authentic. And they're going to convince you that if you just take a picture of your body part, because I'm insecure about my body part, and I just want to make sure that my body part looks the same as everybody else's, and that's a big one, right? And our kids feel sorry for the other kid, like, well, I don't want them to like feel so sad and be so bummed out about this. I'll make sure that they know that their body part looks fine, right? I'm a nice person, I'm a nice kid, I'm kind and loving. If that happens, they have to have an opportunity or an ability to come to you or come to somebody. We want them to come to us, but our kids have absolutely zero ability to come to you and say to you, Mom, Dad, I decided it was a good idea to take pictures and send on the internet. I'm talking to a stranger on the internet, and now he's being mean to me. Can you imagine those words, even if you can imagine being a teenager saying those words to your parents? It's near impossible, right? They may want to come to you, they may know they should come to you, but formulating those words is way too hard. So I believe that when you leave here tonight, those of you who are here with your children, have a conversation with them about what is it, what word can we make up, and it doesn't matter, and I didn't practice what the words will be. John Deere tractor, I don't know, I can't think of anything else. A word that's not used too frequently in your conversations, obviously, where a child can come to you and say, John Deere tractor, because that's a word they can say, right? And you promise to, first of all, breathe, right? And the next words you say to your child are, I'm Team Carlos, I'm Team John, I'm Team Brittany, whatever it is. And whatever has happened to you, we're going to get through this. We're going to figure it out. That the first words that you say to your child aren't exactly what we want to say, which is, we can all say it out loud, right? I told you never to do that. And I am not good at this, right? My son set his pedal to cruise control the other day, driving through a state with a rental car with out-of-state license plates on it, and got pulled over. And what was the first thing I said to him? What? Like, why? You know, that is our knee-jerk reaction. But that's why our kids don't tell us. Because what they need to hear is, I've gotten in over my head, and I need to hear from my mom and dad that you're Team Carlos, and that we're going to get through this, so that we don't what? Blame our victims. That we don't participate in not being mad at the bad guys. That we don't participate by immediately saying our victim just did something wrong. And I know what the schools are doing. I know the schools are teaching these kids, don't do sexting, don't participate in pictures being exchanged. You'll ruin your life and you won't get through this. And you'll get charged with the production of child pornography. And the reason that they're running these campaigns and doing these Scared Straight programs is to figure out a way to stop all of the sexting in the schools between peers. But what that's doing is it's blocking our victims from ever being able to come forward and say, I got in over my head, and this is what happened to me, and there's a bad guy out there. And we have parents that are reluctant to even come forward to law enforcement because they believe we're going to charge their child with the production of child pornography. No, we're not. No, we're not. We're going to charge a predator. We're going to charge a bad guy because we blame bad guys for doing this to victims. So you came here tonight, if you came here tonight and said to yourself, I got to figure out how to make my kid not do something wrong, I get it. But what I also want you to figure out is, God forbid, if my kid gets in over their head, they get manipulated, they get groomed, that they know I'm someone that they can come to. And if you want to continue that conversation and say, if you literally can't say that word to me, write it down, put it on a piece of paper, let me find it at my morning coffee. And I'll know that day I'm going to what? First, breathe. And second, choose Team Carlos. So do that tonight. Kids, you get to make up the word. Parents, you get to promise that you're going to breathe if that kid ever says that word to you. And that you're going to believe in the system and trust the system that that kid did nothing wrong. I know they did something wrong in your household, right? Because we told them. How many times? Hundreds of times. Clean your room, be nice to your sister, walk the dog. We can't say that enough to make it occur. We say it every hundreds and maybe thousands of times. So we have to say this hundreds and thousands of times to our kid to help protect them, to try to prevent this. But the reality is, if you can't prevent it, you have to intervene, and you have to intervene in a way that your child knows that you're going to say what? I'm Team Carlos, right? Thank you.